Good morning. Welcome to this broadcast. We're here with Ed Byus, who is one of the founding members of Tactical Evangelism. Ed is the Chief Operating Officer. He spent 20 years in the military. He was on different tactical missions, helicopter pilot, liaison officer. And then he and a friend, Gary Walker, who also was in the military, started Tactical Evangelism in the wake of the pandemic, or just pre-pandemic in 2020. And now they're in this ministry of training various Christians for work, whether it's on the mission field or university campus and the local church community. So Ed, welcome. We're glad to have you today.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Rudy.
I noticed in some of the literature that you put out, especially on your webpage, you say you specialize in local churches as they serve the communities, global missions, organizations and missionaries, and then ministry serving to break through barriers on difficult secular university campuses. So what's at the core of your training?
So the core of our training is we really look at how missions and military kind of bridge that gap. And the reason being is our vision is to see the gospel advance to all people, all nations, through all barriers. So how do we do that? The mission is to equip those gospel-driven believers, reach the lost in difficult areas. So when we start looking at difficult areas and barriers, we have those in our local community. We've got a lot of Afghan refugees being relocated right here. We've got churches who are sending out missions teams, for a couple of weeks at a time. We've got global missions that are facing barriers. And then, near and dear to my heart, with having 6 kids, a couple getting ready to, one's in college, one getting ready to start college, is the universities have become the frontline battleground for the hearts and minds of our youth. Yes. And if we don't reach them, how do we get the next generation of missionaries, whether it's here locally or globally? Mm-hmm. And so as we started looking at it, we don't have a left or right issue, black or white issue, vax, unvaxxed. We've got a heart issue. Mm-hmm. And so the only way we're going to accomplish that is allow Jesus to affect their hearts. Mm-hmm. So it's a heart issue. So when we got to this, we started looking at, when we look at the vision and the mission and all the barriers in those 3 sections that you talked about, how do special operations affect that? Well, we affect it by always coming back to the fundamentals. And the fundamental always starts with the gospel. And so we look at our experience throughout the world. When people look a lot of times at special operations, what they look at is a guy with a beard, who's kind of rough, has a weapon, kicking indoors. What they don't see is they don't see the humanitarian assistance. They don't see the intelligence. They don't see the doing humanitarian assistance or non-combatant evacuations. There's so many different skill sets that they bring to the table. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing, though, is how do we take these barriers and solve these problems with critical thinking when we're in a difficult situation? So that's really the core of what we're doing. When you look at Afghanistan in 2001, we had all the technology in the world after 9/11. We had helicopters, we had planes, we had boats, we had weapons, we had all these things, but yet we rode in on horseback because that's what we needed in order to link up with the Northern Alliance. So all the technology in the world, we go back to ancient times of riding horseback into battle.
Interesting.
And so we look at the barriers that we're facing now as the threat evolving. Can we think outside the box a little bit? Mm-hmm. And how do we take what the missionaries or what the universities are bringing us, saying, here's our barriers? Because we don't know all the barriers. We're not going to say, hey, A plus B equals C. We're going to let you tell us what the barriers are, and then we're going to develop a team around that and start helping to solve some of these complex problems.
Let me see if I'm following you. Mm-hmm. Then whether you go to university campus or it's a foreign country or it's a local church community that has some real problems, real difficulties, the whole goal, the strategy is to find ways that you can get the gospel to people to bring about life transformation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
And so how do we do that? We take the best of the best that we have within our network. We develop teams. We always fall back on the gospel, because without the gospel, there's no change. Mm-hmm. And then we start with fundamentals. One of our sayings is we're always trying to master the basics without ever thinking we've arrived.
Now, when you apply your strategy, your mission strategy, you also teach, don't you teach some basic survival skills or some things like that along the way as well?
Absolutely. So one of the programs that we start with on the global missions is what we call ACTS, Advanced Christian Training Series. And in that, the first core phase of that is the essentials. Start with the gospel. We look at the tactics of the apostles. How did Peter do it in Acts chapter 2? How did Paul do it in Acts chapter 17? So let's not forget the way they started this, and there's no reason to, for lack of better words, reinvent the wheel. We can look at them and we can apply that now. We get into pre-mission planning. What do we need to think about before we ever go? Who are we linking up with when we go? How do we get through customs? You know, if they start questioning us, how do we get through that? What is our digital awareness? What's our identity management footprint? Let's just start thinking through problems before we get into the problem set. We get into communications. We get into some medical training, some survival. Really, it's a survival mindset. What happens if I encounter, because in the 5 days that we train, the essentials, we can't get into every problem they're going to face. So really what we're doing is we're giving them a foundation of how to think and how to problem solve when we get into these difficult situations.
Who could benefit from your training? I know missionaries, but if you're talking to church members, pastors, others, who could benefit from the training that you offer?
So obviously, like you said, the missionaries. For the churches, it's when they're sending out a missions team.
Okay.
As we talk to the missionaries that are receiving some of these missions teams, are they a liability or are they an asset? And it's not that what they're bringing is not a calling, it's are they missing something that could hinder what they're trying to do on the mission field. And then obviously the mission directors from the university, whether it's Crew, whether it's Fellowship of Christian Athletes, whether it's Ratio Christi, some of these organizations that we've talked to, they're benefiting from us organizing a team and organizing a big event. How do we reach a mass of people? Well, we do it through strategy, through tactics. And so they're benefiting by allowing us to come on and reach the youth, the next generation.
Well, look, we appreciate you taking the time to come by and be with us today, and we will get your contact information out to people if they, they see a need, that they can just contact you. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Perfect.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Rudy.